You've tuned in to the 49ers Rush podcast, and here is your host, John Chapman.
Welcome back to another episode of the 49ers Rush podcast, and we are staying with our NFL draft breakdown. We will continue our edge rushers, and today we got three great ones, all of which should probably go in the first round, if not the first half of the first round. Clelin Ferrell, Jachai Polite, and Brian Burns. All of these are, top-end kind of edge guys, and if you missed our previous episode, we went into depth on Nick Bosa and Josh Allen. So this is kind of the next tier. And again, if you want to go back and listen to the previous episode, I recommend you do so if you haven't already. But I have Nick Bosa in his own tier. Then I have Josh Allen slightly below him. I still think he goes top 10, probably top 8. A very high draft gate on him. But what we're going to do today, I'm going to break through all of my scouting notes and coaching notes that I have on these players, player comparisons, draft positions, and then I'm going to go through, I guess I stole this a little bit from Bill Walsh, a huge Bill Walsh guy, where he would create criteria where he would rate each position. So things where he would go through with the scale of 1 to 10 and rate these players. And so I have 10 separate categories, things like speed rush with bend, power/bull rush, quick first step. So for all three of these guys, I've gone through, I've plugged in all the data, watched way too much film. My wife is starting to get mad at me already, and it's very early in draft season, but it's what it is. So stay with us. That's what we're going to be doing. And we're going to start off with the Clemson National Championship, Clelin Ferrell. Now, even though these three guys that we talk about today are all considered edge guys, they have very different strengths and weaknesses. So even though they would play the same position, you can't really grade them. It's not the whole apples to apples thing, because some of them are smaller guys, as far as weight, whatever. But Clelin is by far the biggest edge, and that's at all top end. Whether you put in Nick Bosa or Josh Allen, Polite, Burns, it doesn't matter. He is the largest, unless you consider Rashard Gary part of that. But Clelin Ferrell, 6'5", 265. What makes him special, he is a powerful edge defender with great anticipation. He understands what's going to go on. His football awareness is off of the charts, and he is amazing. He's not fast, but his get-off is ideal for a 3 end, because he understands snap counts and how to anticipate, and he understands quarterback adjustments and all those things. There's so many times whenever you're watching film, you would see the quarterback call an audible at the player where they look to the sideline, to the coaches that you see a lot in college, and as soon as they started talking the offense, you would see Clelin's head whip around and start communicating with the linebackers and adjust what he's going to do, because he understands what is coming. Now, very violent hands. I put amazingly violent hands. And what I mean by that is whenever he engages with the offensive blocker, you see the head of the tackle jolt several times. He creates separation with his hands. He's not a speed guy, but he is able to create separation with his hands, which allows him to use his leverage to get to where he wants to go. He creates separation on almost every play with the offensive lineman, and that's run and pass. Thicker than the other top edge players, as I said, and is by far the most punishing tackler in this group. Whenever he tackles you, you feel it. He's not a sling you down with his arms because he's long, which we'll talk about with Brian Burns. He is a I'm going through your soul type of a guy. If he gets a clean sack on the quarterback, there's a chance the quarterback's not getting up. So effort and instincts are elite for a bigger edge guy. You see him going nonstop. He never stops. And whenever I get to my player comparison, I think you guys will kind of understand how I see this guy. Now, his career stats are absolutely incredible. Somebody that's been doing it for 3 straight years now. He got injured. He tore his ACL his senior year in high school, and so missed his senior year in high school. That kind of carried over into his freshman year, so he only got to play in 1 game towards the end of the season. But for 3 straight years, just elite potential. Sophomore year, 6 sacks. Junior year, 18 sacks, and then he redshirted. So his redshirt freshman year, 6 sacks. Redshirt sophomore year, 9.5 sacks. Redshirt junior year, which was 2018, 11.5 sacks. 50.5 career tackles for loss. This is who this guy is. He plays in the offense's backfield. He is not a guy that gets driven off the ball ever. You don't ever see that from him. He is a guy that he puts your tackle in the quarterback or the running back's lap. And if you try to run away from him, which most teams try to do, that's okay, because he will chase you down. Not because of speed, but because he takes wonderful angles and he doesn't quit. And whenever it's funny, whenever up backs or tight ends try to block him, they just bounce off of him. Like he can't get there. Now he hits the quarterback quite often, and several of his sacks take place on the second or third counter move, which is very, very special. And again, this is something that separates him from Jachai Polite. He is a guy that never quits, and if his first rush move isn't there, he's going to figure out a counter move and keeps getting there. Now, he prefers the speed to bull rush, where he gets on the upfield shoulder to try to get the tackle off and then just powers through him. Probably one of the most famous people to do this currently in the NFL is Khalil Mack, whose athleticism is way beyond anything that Clelin Ferrell has. I'm not saying he is Khalil Mack or anything along those lines, but that's kind of what Khalil Mack can do because he's so strong and so fast. He gets to that upfield shoulder, then uses his hand leverage through the chest or shoulder of the offensive tackle and just pushes him straight into the quarterback. And again, Clelin Ferrell is the strongest, most powerful bull rusher off the edge in this entire draft class. He never quits. Now, moving on there, he does lack elite speed and bend. He doesn't have that, which is the number one criteria you're looking for whenever you're doing these edge rushers. Again, that was the exact same thing Bill Walsh even said, where speed and bend off the edge is huge, but elite production is still there because of the power, effort, and instincts. He was a military kid, went to a military school, and youngest of 9 kids. This kid has his stuff in order. If you are worried about off the field or lack of passion, you don't have to do that with Clelin Ferrell. I have him closer to the Josh Allen tier than I do these next guys tier. So I have Nick Bosa by himself, then I have Josh Allen and Clelin Ferrell in that order, in that second tier pass rush. I think all 3 of those will go top 10, possibly top 8, possibly top 5, to be honest with you. I love Clelin Ferrell, and again, his numbers are awesome. He's got 5 passes defensed. He forced 5 fumbles in his career. He's a guy that is always around the ball, and just everybody loved this kid. ACC Defensive Player of the Year, Consensus All-American, Ted Hendricks Award. Like, it is there for him. And whenever you look at what this Clemson defense did to Alabama and throughout the whole year, he was the leader of the defense. Like, he was the guy. And if you go back and you watch that national championship, he put a top 10 tackle in Jonah Williams on his butt. Like, he is strong. So my player comparison for Clelin Ferrell is Justin Smith clone. If you go back to watching Justin Smith film coming out of Missouri, he was drafted by Cincinnati, then moved over to the 49ers where he had, finished off a great career. He is just a guy that will grade out positive on almost every play. Run game, check. Coverage skills, all right. Pass game, incredible. So if we look at, let's go through my criteria real quick for Ferrell before we move on to Polite. Okay, these are the 10 categories, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst. So here we go. Speed rush with the bend, and these are in order of importance for the things you scout for an edge guy. So speed rush with a bend, he gets a 6. It's probably his lowest category. Okay, power bull rush, a 9. Almost a perfect 10. Quick first step is an 8, even though he's not a speed guy. He is always out and ahead of everybody else on the defensive line. Play recognition, 9. Effort motor, perfect 10. Times on the ground, this is times he gets knocked down. He's at about a 5. It happens sometimes because whenever he bull rushes, he gets his leverage out over his feet, and sometimes he kind of goes over the tackle, so that's not one of his best categories. Punishing tackler, perfect 10. Hands used to create separation, 9. Run game, he is a 9. He is amazing, whether it's outside, inside, power run game, doesn't matter. He is great at all of it. Coverage skills is 2. So those are kind of the way that you go through and you evaluate this guy and you kind of see what he has done and what he will do. I absolutely love this kid. So let's jump over to our number 2 guy, Jachai Polite out of Florida, 6'2", 242. Now, after we get out of Ferrell, we are starting to get into quote-unquote project players. And what I mean by that is they're not polished, and they're not complete. They're not offering the complete package. So I love Jachai Polite. I think that he is a great player, but whenever you look at a 6'2 edge player, 242 pounds, he might be the shortest and one of the lightest edge players in this entire draft, but he's still going to be going in that first round. So, but you've got to understand, if you're looking for this guy to be a power player in a run game on first down, it's not going to happen. It's not who he is. He's just too small, and it's not his game. He disappears so much in the running game. But let's talk about the good things. Jachai Polite, pure and simple, speed and twitch off the edge. If you are a defense that just lacks that edge pressure, like the 49ers, or you're missing something like that, Jachai Polite is awesome. Now, the problem is, because he's powerful and he's smaller and not powerful at the point of attack in the run game, he's probably only going to be a 2-down player at most his first year in the NFL. He's going to have to either get bigger, or you just have to say, look, this is a guy that comes in pass rushing situations only, and we're just going to leave it at that. Think back to Aldon Smith his first year. Even though they have different makeup as far as physical features and the way they play, it's going to take a defensive coordinator to understand this guy's not going to be anchoring our outside leverage on 1st and 10 against the New England Patriots when they come out in 22 personnel or 12 personnel. He's not your guy. So he is going to be a guy that's going to come in, and I think he could easily get into double-digit sacks, but his snap count's going to be around 40 to 50% for the defense as a year total. He's not a complete player yet. So now here we go. Disappears several times throughout the game. If you have a speed or a long offensive tackle, you don't see Jachai Polite show up. He'll bring his speed rush, which my biggest critique of him is he really only has one pass rush move, and that is pure speed off the edge. And if you are long enough or you have a great kick slide as an offensive tackle, then he's basically going to be a non-factor almost the entire game. So he is a guy that is going to have to add to his pass rush repertoire, even though he's probably the best speed rusher in this entire I put Josh Allen ahead of him, but Josh Allen's very, very special. Jachai Polite is insane when it comes to this idea, but his best fit is not in a 4-3. If you run a 3-4 and you want a stand-up player on the outside, which is what he did mostly at Florida, then I think that's his best fit. Most of the teams picking at the top of the draft, they're running a 4-3, and they all need edge rushers. So I guarantee you those top 3 to 4 teams in the draft that are looking for an edge rusher, they have a giant asterisk by this guy's name. He is great, but not ideal. And so you're taking a player out of his kind of what he's known, what he's done, and you're hoping he will translate to be able to put his hand down in the ground. Now, his stance I have a lot of problems with. He takes a lot of fast false steps. So when the ball is snapped, he'll be ready to go, kind of like he's going out of the blocks in a track meet, but he'll step behind him and then take off. Now, he's so fast and so twitched up that he makes up for that a lot of times. But there were several times throughout a game where you'd watch him and you'd be like, oh, man, like, he's negating his own speed because his stance is awful. So maybe he can fix that if he does put his hand in his ground. I don't know. But again, you can hear in the way I'm talking about this guy that there's lots of quote-unquote question marks of, well, he probably can, but we haven't seen it yet. So he looks like a pinball player out there. Whenever old linemen hit him, he bounces off. There is no power bull rush. He has zero. He just doesn't do it. Maybe a spin move or a bounce off and try to take another angle, and you'll see him several times 5 to 6 yards behind the quarterback because he'll try to do that edge, and then the lineman will just punch him, and he just flies away. So, but the thing is this, his speed and effort are just insane. Yes, his film does get boring a lot of times, and again, if the old lineman gets their hands on him, it's over, but the guy is unreal, and one of the strengths of his game is he led the NCAA in forced fumbles because he's that sneaky. If you hold the ball long, he comes off of the blind side most of the time, defensive right, offensive left. if you hold that ball a long time as a quarterback, he's going to come behind you and he strip sacks. That's what he does. He's not a punishing tackler. He's a swipe down with his arms and sling the quarterback down, and it's very, very effective. He had 6 forced fumbles this year, 8 on his career. Again, led the entire country. If we look at sacks, again, he's a 1-year production player. He had 11 sacks this year, only 2 his sophomore year and only 2 his freshman year. So you're saying somebody that, he showed up 1 year, and that's great, but he's only been a full year starter for 1 year, and even in that, he wasn't playing a lot of the snaps. So his sophomore year, he only played 7 games, freshman year, 9 games. This year, he played the full slate. He did have 19.5 tackles for loss, which is incredible. So if I look at my player comparison for who Jachai Polite is, it's D Ford, who had a great year and is about to get paid a lot of money, probably going to get franchise tagged with the Chiefs, but without the power. So he's D Ford speed off the edge, but without the power. And if we go back to what D Ford was coming out of Auburn, I was pretty high on this player, but again, it was a lot of the same critiques. He is a guy that his rookie year is going to be a learning year. So you've got to lose a lot of those expectations of a guy that's going to come in and have 12, 13 sacks his year. I don't know. I just don't know. So D Ford without the power, I have a late first round grade on him. I think that Polite will probably go around 16, that middle of the first round, just because of the need of the position. But again, he's not a guy that I'm super high on. If the 49ers trade back, I'd love to have him. Obviously, I think that he could instantly improve our entire defensive play, but not on first down and only in pass rushing situations. So here we go. Let's go through the criteria. The Bill Walsh grading scale with some extra ones. Speed rush with a bend. I have him as an 8. The only reason why I only have him as an 8 is because he takes a false step, takes a while getting out, and the offensive line know it's coming every time. So his effectiveness is kind of it's slowed down a lot there because they know exactly what he's going to do every time. Power rush, bull rush is a 1. It's non-existent. Now, there are some times in the run game where he will kind of get behind his pads and hit somebody, but you never see it in the pass rush against a big offensive tackle or offensive guard. Quick first step, I have him as a 7. Again, that false step hurts him there. Good coaching can get that corrected, but again, I hate going into evaluation saying, yeah, well, we can fix that. Like, I'm not coaching the kid, so I don't know. I have him as 7 there. Play recognition's a 6. Nothing special. Effort motor, absolute 10. When he is out there, head on fire, he's making tackles 30 yards downfield, opposite side. He never stops. And that's something you can't coach. Absolutely love the speed plus the effort. Times on the ground, 3, he gets knocked down quite a bit. He gets lifted off the ground quite a bit again, just being so light. Punishing tackler, 2, he is not a guy that's going to hit you. His biggest hits were kind of like on wide receiver screens or going against small running backs. Like, you never see him destroy a quarterback. Hand separation, hand use, a 1. Some of the worst hands I've ever seen. And for a small guy, that makes it rough because he's got to get that fixed, and that's something that's very hard to teach. Run game is a 3. He disappears, and there's times in film where he literally is engulfed by the bigger offensive tackles. Coverage skills are a 5. So that's my breakdown of Polite. And before we get into Brian Burns, our last of the episode today, I want to take a chance and just thank our sponsor, holy freaking cow, Game Day Sports and Memorabilia. These guys are unreal, and if you have not already, they have given us an autographed, authentic Roger Craig jersey to give away. Very, very simple. It's my pinned tweet. All you got to do is go to my Twitter handle, at JL_Chapman. Retweet that and subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you guys haven't already, I put so many videos where I go over what I'm seeing. So these times where I say, oh, that's poor hand usage, I'll put the clip on there and I'll cover that with my mouse and show you what he should do as opposed to what he shouldn't do. And those are up on YouTube. So to find my YouTube channel, just search John Chapman, John Chapman. Then under filter, whenever you click that, go to channels, and you'll see mine. I'm the goofball with the sunglasses on as my profile pic on there. So subscribe to my YouTube channel, retweet that, and you are automatically entered for a free autograph, the very first running back in the history of the NFL to have 1,000 yards receiving, 1,000 yards rushing in the first season. Did it before Marshall Faulk. There's only been 2 all time. So go do that. And compliments to Game Day Sports and Memorabilia. You have any memorabilia needs whatsoever, birthdays, anything like that, graduation, head over there. They have everything. It doesn't matter if you're a Niners fan, hockey fan, basketball fan. They got it all. So just want to say thanks again to Game Day Sports and Memorabilia. Now, our last player that we're going to break down today is Brian Burns, 6'5", 235 out of Florida State. This guy he's a hybrid. He doesn't make sense. Being 6'5" and 235, I'm very curious to see what he's going to come in at the combine because he might be less than that. I really do. He is a long 3-down player, perfect fit for a 4-3. He is just super, super long. And you see it in the run game, in the pass game, when he engages with blockers. Like, he is just long and tall. And, I mean, you just see him. And his arms I can't wait to see his wingspan because when he's standing up, he reminds me a little bit of Tremaine Edmonds last year, who off the top of my head, I could be wrong. I think he had like a 77-inch wingspan. Like, he had 4 arms longer than LeBron James. That's Brian Burns. This dude is an eagle whenever his arms are out. So you're getting a long edge player. Now, there are some major areas of concern. And Brian Burns, I got a lot of flack on Twitter, man. And I love it when people hate what I say and tell me I'm an idiot. I love those things. Because Brian Burns is a highlight reel special, but his game film does not match his highlights. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Watching somebody's highlights is like reading a dating profile that they put together themselves. Oh, like long walks on the beach and I love traveling. Of course, whatever. But whenever you watch game film as opposed to highlights, that's like talking to the ex. You get all the dirty and all the bad. You get to see some of the good, but it's off and on. And this is a big reason why, let's jump out for a second, Brian Burns talk, why I love Nick Bosa so much. There is no difference between his highlights and his game film. Every single play is a positive. It doesn't matter if it's in the run game. It just, every single play looks the same. You know, Pro Football Focus released their highest grades ever for a defensive player. In the past 6 years, the highest graded season of all time is Nick Bosa in 2017. I know he only played 4 games this year or 3 games this year before he got hurt, but he is just so consistent. Now, once we get into these second-tier guys outside of Clelin Ferrell, there's lots of question marks. Now, Brian Burns, his highlights, he shows that he has great hands and he can bend. He has shown that, and it looks awesome when you watch the highlights. However, if you go back and watch the game film, this kid disappears and several different times runs into the offensive tackle with his hands down at his waist and doesn't even put his hands on there, and he'll just give up on the play on a bend. Now, what's unique about Brian Burns, however, is he plays with a lot of effort. But he will take himself out of the pass rush by running behind the quarterback by 4 to 5 yards and just not try to bend into the tackle. Yes, the highlights show that he can do it. Game film shows another story where 9 out of 10 times this guy is fine running behind the quarterback, which is just a waste. So he lacks his first step and top end speed are okay. It's not great, but his motor and effort helps him make plays downfield on the regular. It's almost like he plays like a linebacker a lot of time. He understands pursuit angles very, very well. Again, does not use his length well as he plays under his pads. And what I mean by that is whenever he engages, let's say it's at the point of attack and it's just a power run play right at him, he extends his arms out in front of his chest and his body is under his pads. That is not good because you're just basically using bench press move. Now, Clelin Ferrell, Nick Bosa, Josh Allen, these guys, they extend their arms out almost above their shoulders, and their shoulders and pads are behind their arms. Instead of standing upright, they're basically down almost in a power clean position, which is what you teach as a football coach. That's where your leverage is. Burns is a look and watch guy. So he creates separation with his arms and kind of looks into the backfield to figure out what he wants to do. He's a long player that wants to kind of sling blockers out of the way instead of going through them. And so that's going to be something that's going to be rough. Now, he never gets pushed back by offensive linemen, and he jukes them a lot of times. His favorite stunt and pass rush move is kind of like a swim move to the inside, which it seemed like he had a two-way go on almost every play at Florida State. They had pretty athletic linebackers that could flow side to side pretty well. So their scheme allowed him to do that. Can't do that in the NFL, especially in the NFC West, going against Russell Wilson. You do that one time, he's outside the pocket, you're in trouble. So something he's going to have to fix. Now, his play speed is very low. This happens a lot with long players where they don't look like Jachai Polite, who's 4 inches shorter than Brian Burns, just flying down the field. But his play speed's slow. His effort's high, but he's not one of those guys that's going to run a great 40. I'm going to see him kind of a 4.8, 4.7 range. And again, that bend on the edge is beyond inconsistent. So my player comparison for him is a more consistent Arden Key. Going back to LSU, he got drafted by the Raiders. He had somewhat of a rocky first year, but got some splash plays. So he's a more consistent Arden Key. And if we have a great coaching staff, this guy's ceiling is very, very high. But I'm telling you right now, his floor is pretty damn low. Worst case, I don't want to say that. I have a second round grade on him, an early second round grade. He's going to go in the first 16 picks. He's going to. Because some coach is going to see, man, not only does he have the length and is the perfect prototype of somebody we want manning a 4-3 edge, but we've seen what he can do. He doesn't do it consistently, but some coach is going to say, I can make this kid do what I want. And so some coach is going to convince himself to take this guy early. And I could see him going before Jachai Polite. I would not, just because I don't want to say bust, but there's a chance that this kid will not make it in the NFL because he might. There's just a strong chance. So that's Brian Burns. His production actually not too bad. If you look at what he did at Florida State, again, this is another guy coming out after his junior year, true junior year. Sacks, he had 8.5 sacks as a true freshman. Then he dipped down quite a bit, 4.5 sacks as a sophomore, and then last year had 10 sacks. So he doesn't have elite potential, but 15.5 sacks, tackle for loss. Again, you can kind of see, man, he's a guy that's going to get a lot of tackles, okay? He's got 123 total tackles, but those are effort, and he's a guy that's always around the pile, and he's going to stick his nose in, which you love, but he's not the type of guy that's going to be getting a lot of solo run stops. One thing that I loved about him on film is teams would try to key him on the zone read. He would destroy the mess out of that every time because he's so long. He'd literally stick one arm out and grab the running back at the mesh point, and one arm out and grab the quarterback several times. Like, he is long. So he's one of those guys that if you leave him unaccounted for, he'll make you pay, but he's not going to drive through a offensive lineman to force a major play on the back end. So let's look real quick. Let's go through our criteria and how I graded him. All right, so this is Brian Burns in our 10 categories. So speed rush with a bend, I have him at a 7 because, man, he can do it. It's just inconsistent. And if you draft this guy, you are betting we can get this out of him more consistently. Power bull rush is a 4. He almost never goes to that. And if lineman oversets instead of driving through him, he's going to dip inside that B gap, basically go between that inside gap between the tackle and the guard, which he's not going to be able to do in the NFL unless it's called blitz, and he's got outside replacement help. But anyway, quick first steps, 5, not too bad. He's kind of slow getting out of his step. Out of his stance, just average. Play recognition, 5. Besides the zone read, you're not going to see much of him just knowing what's coming. Effort motor is an 8. I wish his speed was a little bit more, but he does try very, very hard. Times on the ground is an 8. He doesn't fall down very much. He's very long. You'll see him try to cut block or take his knees out or roll block, and I mean his arms are so long they're almost touching the ground, so he gets his hands on them perfectly there. Punishing tackler, 4. He's a sling down wrap-up tackler. He doesn't drive through with his feet. It's called a gator tackle now in the NFL, where you wrap around their waist and sling behind them. He does that consistently. Hand use, 5. Should be a 10. He has exactly how you draw it, but he doesn't use them all the time. Very consistent. Run game 7, really, really good, especially on backside pursuit. Understands pursuit angles well. Coverage is a 4. You don't see him do this at Florida State, but that length and athleticism at his size, he's one of those space zone eaters where he's going to get his hands on some tipped balls at some point in his life. He had 7 passes where he deflected in his career. You'd kind of see him where they don't block him off the edge and try to just do a real quick screen to the wide receiver out. He's so long, he can almost get his hands on that every time. So, hopefully you enjoyed this. Again, that's the breakdown of Clelin Ferrell, Jachai Polite, and Brian Birds. I'm going to do one more episode on edge rushers, and it's going to be, turning into a 49ers favorite after that Senior Bowl practice week. Montez Sweat, Jalen Ferguson, and Rashawn Gary. So stay tuned, and if you haven't already, make sure you hit subscribe, rate, and review. Helps us out a lot. And head over to Twitter at JL_Chapman. Retweet that tweet so you can get a free Roger Craig jersey. And head over to YouTube, type in John Chapman so you can see some of the film breakdowns I do so that you are not left behind on that. Thanks, guys. Stay strong, faithful.